Morning, and thank you for being with us. The campaigning is over. The commercials have stopped airing, and now it's time for our newly elected and in many cases re-elected politicians to get to work. This morning, we're here to do a bit of reflecting. We're looking back at election 2022 with our two political experts. They've been guiding us along the campaign trail this year. Susan Raff is Channel 3's chief political reporter. Dan Haar is a columnist and associate editor with CT Insider, of course, part of the Hearst, Connecticut Media Group, also owners of the newspapers you see there listed on your screen. We've been proud to partner with Hearst on our political coverage this year. I'm hoping it's not going to end. I think this would be a great reality show. The three of us, we could just talk about whatever you guys want to talk about.
What are we going to do now?
A regular segment.
Can I sleep for a month instead of doing all the things I said I was going to do after the election?
Well, it is after the election,
Yes.
So let's start there. 5th District, Jahana Hayes, George Logan. It was a narrow margin to victory, but not enough to have a recount. What do you take from it, Susan?
Well, I think a lot of people have election fatigue, but the Democrats overall are pretty happy with election night. I think everything that was predicted has come to fruition. We expected that the 5th District was going to be a tight race for Jahana Hayes. Not tight enough for a recount, I don't believe, but tight enough. But every other race, Democrats won comfortably. Statewide, congressional districts, despite the fact that Republicans pumped a lot of money, the National Party, into Connecticut.
Well, in that 5th District, Dan, we certainly saw a lot of money pumped in. Are you surprised that it wasn't different?
It's hard to say you're surprised, but you knew it was going to be close, and it was close. Well, it's funny because when we look at the margins that are 2 points one way or another, if it's 58 to 56, we think of nothing of that. But when it's 49 to 51, that's a big deal. The national trends giveth and the national trends taketh away. In this case, the national trends went both ways for George Logan. He was able to have the message about inflation, crime, and the other stuff that does resonate with voters. Moderate voters in the 5th, and the 5th is a moderate voter place generally, except in some pockets around, where Prospect and so forth. They were worried about sending somebody to the Kevin McCarthy caucus in Congress. That hurt him. So it works both ways, and it comes out in the wash. He's a much better candidate than Jahana Hayes.
And I think he has something to be pleased about in his campaign. I mean, he came very close. Certainly, I mean, that is a swing district, but, Logan definitely was a viable candidate and did pretty well in that district.
And I think an indication of that, I was surprised by Jahana Hayes' victory speech, where she seemed almost defiant for the first time in the campaign, talking about the math is the math, I've got the mandate, I'm going to, represent this district. You could feel that the campaign had weighed down on her as well.
Well, I think all along, everyone had been saying it was a tight race and it was going to be a tight race. But then when it's you and it's in that 11th hour and you're realizing maybe it's going to go the other way, you can see it in her face. And you could see it on the campaign. The times that I caught up with her, she definitely was concerned and worried about not getting reelected.
She's a great public speaker. She did well in the debates. She's not great at getting and hitting all the points and the ground game and all that stuff. So it worked out in her favor this time, and I think it probably sent a scare to her. And the third time is always a tough one because, you have the excitement factor, and then the third is like, the
sophomore
test.
jinx or something.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Tell us about the race for governor. Lamont victorious, a wide margin here. What do you make of that outcome?
Well, I think there are a lot of takeaways from that. I think that Governor Lamont is popular. I think people like him. He passed record tax cuts. We have a huge surplus. He's, pushed for fiscal stability. A lot of women like him. He's got the message of, pro-choice. So I think that worked in his favor. But what's interesting, and I think you and I have talked about this, is that, 4 years ago, Bob Stefanowski really wasn't that great of a candidate, and he's much better now. And he has said that. He said that to me.
Yeah.
And he really has. He's been out there getting his message across. But I'm not sure it was enough. And I do think that the whole reproductive rights, that has backfired in many parts of the country. And I think here in Connecticut, people are just not ready for anything extreme, certainly.
2 points I would make. One, my colleague John Moritz, who was not in Connecticut in 2018, he was covering the state capitol in Arkansas, I think I got it right, Little Rock, made the observation to me that if Stefanowski had run this same campaign in 2018, he would have won. He would have been governor. And I agree with that. Having covered that campaign, I do agree with that, because Lamont was an unknown factor.
And I just want to clarify something. You know, you heard many times on the campaign trail, Bob Stefanowski said he was pro-choice. Laura Devlin said that. But Bob Stefanowski also talked about restrictions. So I think that kind of resonated with people. Well, you know, I don't know. So I wanted to be clear about that. He wasn't a Leora Levy, for example, Senate. And that was interesting, too. I mean, that race was called 5 minutes after the polls were closed. That was so surprising when I was in Hartford with all the Democrats, where Lamont was, and Blumenthal. Even Blumenthal was surprised. All of a sudden, the race was called.
$3.5 million per minute.
Yeah.
Of waiting time. The other point I wanted to make about Bob Stefanowski is, because economic conditions here are not so bad, you can argue, I get you can quibble, they're this, they're that. They're not so bad, the reality. With a $4 billion budget surplus, income growth, jobs growth, he had to be tougher. He had to be more negative than he might have wanted to be about how things are. He is a great corporate manager. He wanted to bring that to the state capitol. He never articulated how that's going to work. That hurt him. His general sort of personality of being this sort of tough guy didn't help him. But overall, it was the trends. It wasn't so much the candidates.
I think it's also important to note the whole, the lack of confidence for police, right, which Bob Stefanowski talked a lot about on the campaign trail, and the police accountability, the reform, and qualified immunity, which, you know, limits liability or exposes them. That wasn't enough to really push that envelope, and I really think that maybe I think he thought all law enforcement would vote for him. And even if they did, it was not to the level of how many union, AFSCME and AFT and all of these others. It gave him some support. But let's face it, I mean, there's a nationwide shortage of law enforcement, and they don't have police reform bills. So there's a bigger picture. I'm not quite sure that that was enough.
Plus, crime is higher in red states.
Yeah.
So we've talked 5th District, we've talked governor. Any other surprises as you looked at the statewide results? Anything that was notable to you? Yeah,
I just think that when you look at the Republicans statewide, no matter who it was, whether they ran a good campaign or a bad campaign, whether they were expected, whether the trends were in their relative disfavor or not, they all got between 41 and 44%, maybe 45. Harry Aurora and Mary Fay. Credit to her. You know, nobody gave her a shot. Everybody ignored Mary Fay. She was the second leading vote getter among Republicans.
And she ran for Congress against Larson last time.
Yes, she did.
So she's had a little bit of name recognition, but clearly not.
Larry Laser, running in the first, did under 40. So you say, well, he had the worst campaign. He actually was the best performing opponent of John Larson since 2010, I believe. So everybody being in a range tells you that it was outside trends rather than the individual candidates and elections that were at work.
And I think adding to that, that you have some veteran Democratic lawmakers in Connecticut. I mean, everybody knows Dick Blumenthal. Everybody knows Larson. So they know those people. I don't think it's plagiarism if I take a line that I read from Hugh McQuaid on Connecticut News Junkies, and he said, "The red wave is still at sea."
It's at sea, but it could wash up. I want to make the
not here, apparently.
I do wonder if both Stefanowski and Lamont had adhered to the public financing and received $8 million, I think it's 8 or 8.5, instead, maybe with a primary, instead of spending Lamont $22 million and Bob Stefanowski $12 million. A, would the election have looked different? And B, if they were even in money, even without a limit, would the election have looked different?
Do you really think that money would have made a difference?
No, I think I saw enough ads that I knew what the ads looked like. I think it's wasted money. Good for you guys.
Well, it is. I agree with that statement. We have made it to the end of the campaign season. We appreciate you both being here once again. And like I said, I'm hoping for the reality show. I think the three of us would be great on Sunday mornings.
15-second plug. In my column, I'm saying Stefanowski claimed he would cut the margins in cities, and he exactly did that. He cut the margins in cities. It's where he did best.
All right. You got the extra 15 seconds. You get 15 seconds to start the next campaign.
All right.
Thanks for being with us, Dan Harris, Susan Raff. Coming up later in our Sunday Spotlight, snow. They started making it at Okemo last week. We'll talk about when the ski season might start to our north. And up next, powering through winter, the president and CEO of Eversource is joining us to talk about concerns that had him reaching out to President Biden for help. We'll be back right after this.